Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Well, good evening and welcome to this extra live stream on the 2nd of May 2022. Martin North from Digital Finance and Things here. Great to have you on for a special live rant with Edwin. Just before I bring him in, I will just remind you, of course, as normal, that we don't provide financial or legal advice on the channel. Play nice in the chat room, please. We moderate the stream. This is as at the 2nd of May if you're watching in replay. And if you'd like to ask a question, use @WalkTheWorld to get my attention. I also encourage you to share your thoughts in the chat. Very happy for that to happen. But if you don't use Walk the World, I may not see it. And also I've enabled Super Chat, which means you can get your question top of the list, or indeed you can make a contribution to help us with what we do here. So feel free to use the Super Chat too. Anyhow, without further ado, let me push this button. And Edwin, you're in.
Well, stone the crows, Martin. Stone the bloody crows. I just want to also add, we don't provide chicken growing advice nor carrot growing advice. It's not having a good time with those two. So definitely no financial advice, no other form of advice, legal advice, and chicken growing or rooster growing or carrot growing advice. Just want to put it out there.
Or building of walls and ponds, perhaps.
Fish ponds and koi ponds. Or bricklaying advice. I know that.
Well, it looks great to have you on, and I thought your suggestion of having a live one today was really good, because obviously we normally record our rant at 6 p.m. on a Monday, and here we are doing it live. So it's all pretty good. Lots to talk about. But over the weekend there was a load of stuff that went down, right, and so many comments and things. It was quite hilarious, really.
Look, it's incredible. It's they should call the campaigns. They should call them "Buy My Vote," buy my vote property campaigns. With all the incentives going about the place. I mean, we're really out there. The US, my cousins in the US, they're telling me that they could have their student loans forgiven. But I said, listen, we're trumping you. We're going all the way. The government will own they're going to buy half our property. So we're going to have half our property loans forgiven. So your 60,000 is nothing compared to our 360,000.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny, isn't it? If you look at what's happened. So the Conservative side of politics announced a $10 reduction to the pharmaceutical costs, right? And so then Labor said, well, we'll do $12, right? And then, almost every time one side does something, the other side says, no, we'll do the same. They don't want to actually separate themselves at all. And of course, the argument from the Conservative side was that, well, these equity things means that you've got the government sitting at your table rather than actually you owning your property outright. So it's quite funny. But of course, they've got their own scheme with the first home buyer stimulus and everything else. So it's like, anything I can do, you can do better.
Well, that's right. And I think what we like to do is bring it all back to reality or to numbers as opposed to percentages. I mean, we're talking about currently we've got $150,000, $160,000 that ScoMo, the Libs have got out there as a proposed grant or loan, whatever you want to call it, stimulus for those that want to get into the property market. And Labor has come in with $360,000. I mean, who's going to pay for all this if it all goes pear-shaped? That's one of the questions that we need to be asking ourselves and asking our followers. The simple fact is, and I know Tara gets onto it really strongly, and that is at the end of the day, it's the taxpayers that end up paying it if it all goes pear-shaped, or when it all goes pear-shaped, we're going to be picking up the tab. And who do we pick up the tab for? It's not for the poor bastards that got conned into taking on these incentives, but it's really we're picking up the tab to rescue the banks. Isn't that really what happens?
Well, it's all about rescuing the banks, isn't it, at the end of the day? So I put out a tweet over the weekend to say, if you want to keep house prices up, this is what you do, right? Firstly, what you do is another term funding facility, like the Reserve Bank did last time, give very cheap money to the banks. Secondly, the RBA should buy bad loans off the banks. So in other words, all their default loans go back to the RBA. The third one, of course, is to spruik the market and support first-time buyers and encourage more people into the market and do more of these incentives, etc., etc. Increase migration, of course. If you open the floodgates and let migrants in, that's going to create demand. And then, of course, you want to get the mainstream media to keep spruiking like mad because, of course, there's no such thing as property going down or sideways. It only ever goes up, doesn't it? So, and then you added a couple of extra ones, I think, as well.
That's right. We've got to... there's the Cron 3.1, so that'll stop the property sellers from listing the properties because we've got to keep the numbers down. Numbers seem to be growing, getting higher, and they're not taking the winter siesta that we normally see. This seasonal winter siesta that listings on market take, and interesting. The apartment numbers are surging. We're almost hitting the 9,000 now in comparison to last year, where we were closer to the 7,000. So apartment numbers are really edging closer and closer to the magic 10,000. But home listing numbers haven't come down. So you've got to take property listings off the market in order to spook the buyers and obviously get them to pay more. So right now it is becoming a buyer's market. It is a buyer's market in a lot of areas, but at all times, as you and I say, Martin, you just got to be careful what you buy, when you buy, and how you buy, under what conditions, terms and conditions do you buy under. So it's it is interesting, and you and I are very vocal about the fact that nobody seems to be talking about these. The immigration lever that any government, any party that comes in, is likely to pull, post-election.
Well, of course, they won't mention it before the election, but that's really the only lever they've got. And we've had in the last decade, the mining boom dissipating. It was the migration boom that basically made the GDP bigger, although the GDP per capita didn't get bigger. So, and that's basically the only lever I've got. So, think about your numbers. So, this is the numbers for 2022, right? Which is 17,000, and as you say, the apartments is pretty remarkable. And then if you compare that with last year, that's the one there. There you go, 2021. So that's 14,000. But the apartments, it's almost impossible to know why. Why so many apartments, Edwin? I mean, my suggestion, and it's really based on my surveys, is it's property investors in the high-rise sector saying we need to get out because we're going to lose money if we don't.
Well, look, the mainstream media talk about the rental squeeze. And yes, I can see the rental squeeze. We can see it on the ground, and with all the agencies and agents that we talk to, we can, we get it that there's a rental squeeze on freestanding homes. But I don't believe that there's such a big rental squeeze on apartments. Now we know, and I've been talking about the WeChat chatterers, how they've been having difficulties with getting the tenants to vacate the apartments. And there's a lot of renovation work with apartments that got converted around the central hubs. That got converted from 2 bedrooms to being able to accommodate 6, even 8 students in 1 2-bedroom apartment. So there's a lot of there's a lot of retrofitting of getting it back to its original state in order to put it on the market. So we've got that. There's been a lot of issues with the with NCAT, with attending or NCAT dealing with all the backlog in owners obtaining orders to basically evict tenants that haven't been paying the rent, haven't paid the rent. So there's all this that's going on, and a lot of that has been taken up in that space. With homes, it's a lot easier. It has been a lot more manageable to deal with. But I think there's a lot of apartments, and you and I know that there's a lot, and we've spoken about it over and over again. There's a lot of vacant apartments in high-rise development. So investors have to decide: do we want to keep them with with a shaky economy that they're facing, and a lot of these investors are in China, let's not forget, and they're overseas investors, so they're facing a hell of a problem over there. So they've also had to make the decision, and we reported about three or so months ago, maybe a little bit more ago, where there was already a trend of investors selling the apartments in Canada. The Chinese nationals were selling the apartments in Canada, and we would have expected, we were expecting, and we are, I believe, we are seeing the ramifications of that, or the repercussions of what's happening in China and the economic straits that they're facing in China to offload these apartments. Because at the end of the day, if they're not rented, it's costing them money by way of levies, strata levies, and sinking fund levies and so forth, and also the rectification work and special levies that a lot of these apartments require. So this is why I feel that there's going to be a lot more apartments come on market before we start seeing them come off market in the near future.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the interesting thing, as I've been looking in my surveys at this quite closely, some of those sales are definitely overseas sales. So there is definitely something happening with people thinking, particularly in the high-rise sector, time to get out. But I'm also seeing quite a lot of local property investors who bought in when prices were a little bit down, a couple of years ago. I'm looking particularly, for example, at North Ryde, because North Ryde is one of those archetypal areas where property prices for apartments have gone down, 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 down. So people were expecting they would recover, and they're not. And the other interesting thing is that the average rental that you're getting in North Ryde is lower than it was 2 years ago. So basically, there's no upside in terms of rental, there's no upside in terms of capital appreciation. And you've got all of the questions about the quality of construction and the increasing costs from the management committees of those high rises as well. I mean, to my mind, there's almost no valid reason to hold on to those types of properties at the moment.
No, there isn't. And look, there has been a bit of spruiking with from the mainstream media with regards to the rental incomes. And I can't think of who the author of that article was. I think it was in the AFR. They spoke about the rental values for apartments were going up. But look, of course they were going to go up. But there's no mention of how much they went backwards. Now, I know of some apartments, off the top of my head, in Kempsey, they were getting before COVID, they were getting $500 to $550 a week. These are one-bedroom apartments. Whilst COVID and the lockdowns were going on, the rents in that particular block for the one-bedroom apartments, because we've got investors in that block. We've got clients that have got properties in that block. Yeah, that went down, Martin, to 390 for one of them. I think one was being rented for 370. That's from 550 to 370. Now they're climbing back up slowly. Yes, and they have increased the rentals now in some of them for up to 420, 430. So yes, there is a little bit of resurgence, but not pre. COVID, pre-pandemic, pre-lockdowns, and it's not enough to recover a lot of the rental incomes that were lost, because don't forget, there was a lot of shifting sands. A lot of the population migrated from those clusters, from those commercial hubs, and hence the reason why we got an uptick in property prices in the regions. And further afield from the CBDs and from the hubs, and that's why we got in 2021, particularly when the listings on market went down, we got such a huge rise in property values for freestanding homes. I mean, it just never seen before. Never saw how quickly the market could climb, in such a small period of time. Then again, I was very vocal at the time, and I was pointing out to our followers and our viewers that I've never seen less than 5,000 listings on market since Domain and real estate came to life in the early 2000s, or late 90s, early 2000s.
Absolutely. Well, it just shows you that you can never quite predict what's going to happen. There are still properties in North Ryde that are actually being sold on the market today at prices lower than back in 2017. Right. So 5 years. Negative capital growth. Now, there are other areas where people have made more money, and houses and regional areas, etc., etc. But it is an interesting observation just how varied performance of properties are. And of course, these high-level indices that everybody keeps quoting doesn't necessarily tell us a whole lot. And of course, the prop track index came up, right? So this is basically our second month, I think. So this is the REA data. So it's an equivalent to CoreLogic. And I was quite laughed because they published it on Sunday ahead of the CoreLogic data that came out today. But they basically said that, over the last month, there really has been very little movement in Sydney and Melbourne, a little bit of movement in some of the other places. But really, the story is that price growth is definitely easing back in most parts of the country. Regional less than in the cities, but Sydney and Melbourne looking a little bit shaky, which is, perhaps what you might expect, but not necessarily what people would have expected a little while ago. And I think I got this one here. So this is the Westpac representation of the CoreLogic data showing what the Australian dwelling price trend overall is doing. So it's still growing, but growing more slowly. But of course, that's an average across multiple geographies and multiple locations. And Westpac, of course, also put this up to show that the residential property sales were actually dropping in Sydney and in Melbourne. So you can begin to get a bit of a read in terms of property prices a little bit easing back, and probably more later. Plus, of course, the fact that the overall story with regard to the situation, with regard to where is it heading, is looking more uncertain before we even get onto interest rates, and we'll come onto interest rates in a second. Did you take anything else out of the last 24, 48 hours in terms of what people are saying about price growth or lack of it?
Yeah, obviously, you've got your people that are very hopeful that your property prices are going to be dropping 10, 15, 20% over the next 12 months. Then you've got others that are going to be sitting firm. I think what we've got to differentiate is between the lifestyle or the reasons as to why people are buying and where they're buying and what type of property they're buying. As you and I keep on saying over and over again, it's not a one market speak or one. We try not to. We don't paint Sydney with one paintbrush. We do look at the numbers overall, the overall Sydney numbers, and you and I were warning people that we're telling people to watch the numbers because they were starting to rise, and that was one of the warning signals that you and I were speaking about from the quarter last year, where as the numbers were rising, and this is where I keep on saying over and over again, Sydney is not a very big market, and numbers on market that were trending north, and we're starting to we're getting to see 1,000, 1,500 above last year's numbers, and obviously it's all about supply and demand, and because it's a very small market in that regard, it started to take effect even before anything else that was happening from the global global economic issues and so forth. So we were already looking at those numbers. So look, for you and me, I don't believe that it's a surprise what's happening. I've been saying to a lot of our clients that we're sticking to watching those numbers very carefully, particularly in the areas that we're looking for property for them. It's very important to see what the trends are, and then the sentiment that's going to be passed on from the agents to the vendors will take a little bit of time before the vendors realise that, hey, I'm not going to get what my neighbour got for their property 6 months ago, and that was always going to take time. So it's just unfolding the way that you and I have been speaking about that it would unfold. So it's nothing new. What is interesting is what we mentioned earlier on, and that is that both sides aren't really talking about immigration and the levers. Now we've seen a couple of levers that they're pulling, throwing money at the fire with regards to trying to appease the younger voters, I would say, to bend their way because of what they feel or they think that they're going to get post the election. But there's a lot more to play out. One thing for sure is a lot of the politicians don't know whether they're Arthur or Martha, or whether they're the pro-risers or not. But Mark, as you and I say over and over again, hands up all the politicians that don't have an investment property and want property values to go down.
Well, that's right. There is no doubt in my mind that the proportion of property owners within the political system is much higher than outside it. Interestingly, there was some research done over in New Zealand which showed that exactly the same trends there, so that the politicians in New Zealand had 4, 5, 6 properties on average. It was amazing numbers. I don't know what it is in Australia. The interests of politicians, whilst it's meant to be very clear, it actually isn't when it comes to looking at that particular situation. And I guess the point to underscore is that everybody focuses on Sydney, Melbourne, and maybe Queensland because they're the big markets. The other markets are quite important. It's interesting that some of the statistics produced by some of these analysts don't include some of the other states. In fact, a couple of people were saying, does Adelaide exist? I mean, Adelaide's very interesting, as is Hobart, where there is a very different market going on there. Prices have not moved up so dramatically, but they are moving. The listings are much tighter in those areas. So it seems to me that we are still going to see some smaller centres where the market is probably, at least in the short term, going to be a little bit more bullish and price that growth therefore much stronger. The question is, will that actually turn around? Because in the last 2 downturns, the downturn started in Sydney and Melbourne and then spread out and ultimately touched the other corners of the country as well, not so significantly perhaps in some of the smaller centres. So in a way, it is interesting that people don't really look at Adelaide and Tassie in the same degree of analysis as they do in the major centres. Now, you can argue, well, that's because they're so much smaller markets, and that's partly true, but there are still people live there, and then they pay their taxes too. So it's an interesting question as to why it is that we are fixated on the Sydney and Melbourne markets, and that's the royal we, that isn't just you and me, but it's the way that the reporting is done. Everybody worries about a 0.1% fall in Sydney and say, oh, the sky's falling in. Well, what about the significant rises we're still seeing in some other places?
Yeah, and look, this is something that, again, goes back to what you and I speak about over and over again, and that is we've got to be careful as to who we're listening to before we buy, what information we're obtaining before we buy, and even before we sell, for that matter. You want to be on the right side of of the coin, you might say, on either side, whether you're going to be spending money or whether you're going to be making money. So you always want to be on the right side. It's interesting how you're talking about the regional markets, and I think about 6 or so weeks ago we were talking about Queensland markets and what the real estate agents in Queensland were telling us. With regards to some of and also the northern region of New South Wales, where they were saying wait until Easter. This isn't me. This is them out there were telling us that the local agents were saying wait until Easter because things are going to turn around. And lo and behold, outside of again global economic changes and pandemics and everything else. It's the local agents that have the finger on the pulse in a lot of these regions. Outside of, they have more of a finger on the pulse, I should say, in the regional markets or in the smaller cities or the smaller markets than what we would like to believe that they do have. Because the mainstream media focuses on the Sydney and Melbourne or Brisbane. You and I focus on Sydney because a lot of our viewers want to know what's happening in Sydney because they're followers, and this is you could say this is my backyard. So they want to hear, apart from other hints and tips on how to look at property and how to buy property. The main focus for us is the Sydney market and a little bit outside of the Sydney region. So it's an interesting time at the moment. We've got another 3 or so weeks before the actual polling day, before the election day, and but I think my call is that we're going to see more numbers come on, but it's all going to be hell for leather with either party, either major party moving forward, unless the independents really start putting the brakes on. on immigration and any other stimulus that's going to be thrown at the market, because no party wants this property market to fall, regardless of what your persuasion is. Because one doesn't want to inherit a major catastrophic economic grenade, and the other one wants to keep on things ticking along, moving along, and saying, look at us, look what a great job we've done for the last 9 years, and we'll continue to do for the next 4. So it's an interesting time, nevertheless. But how things are playing out, and also it's interesting to note what the local chatterers and the local investment groups that we follow, which is predominantly in our case, is the Chinese chatterers, and it's interesting to see what they're saying and what their appetite has gravitated towards over the last few months as well. They're not looking at crypto, they're not looking at shares or bonds or going back into businesses. For them it's land, rain, hail or shine. Land is where they see value, regardless of whether rates rise 10 points, 50 points, 100 points, because let's not forget, these are people that a lot of these people are people that are cashed up, and they're borrowing very little, if any at all. It's just a matter of re-choosing or reallocating their investment funds into another asset class.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is fascinating to me that the focus is on land, and I think probably standalone houses plus land, and even some commercial properties with land. Right, that seems to be the story. But completely walking away from high rise, but particularly because they see the writing on the wall, I guess, and it is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Let's go on and talk about interest rates a bit, Edwin, now, because there's a lot to talk about here. And I guess a good way into this is the latest 30-day interbank cash rate implied futures yield curve, right? Which basically, down the bottom is the key number. More than 3% is what they're saying, but they're looking at maybe 1% or more than 1% by August. That's what the market is actually saying. Now, I'm not saying that's what the Reserve Bank is going to do, but it's interesting that is what the market is actually saying. And so it does beg the question, so do we think the Reserve Bank is going to lift rates or not lift rates tomorrow? Inflation, of course, was 5.1%, much stronger than expected. The non-discretionary inflation was 6.6%, which is way off the scale. They've got a target of 2 to 3%, and even their trimmed mean number was well above the 2 to 3% target. So the Reserve Bank is really outside its target. And of course, it's reflecting similar moves in other countries like in the US and in the UK and in New Zealand. And somebody actually tweeted just now, posted just now on the forum here that Aussie interest rates 0.1%, New Zealand rates 1.5%. Big difference already, and New Zealand's looking at putting rates up again then. So you did a poll, and this is a result of the poll. This is from a little while ago, so 411 votes. I think we're up to about 430 votes now. But it's interesting that of the people following you, Edwin, half think that there's going to be a rate rise tomorrow. 34% says no, and 15.1% is marginally, presumably, is that a marginal rate, sort of 0.15% or something, I imagine is what you were thinking there. So does that reflect what you were thinking, Edwin? Where are you placed on this spectrum of rate rises or not?
Well, I'm saying I don't believe that they will move. That's my personal opinion. Dusty thinks that they will, and Evan just wants to turn pink. She doesn't care. So it's just one of those things. The question is if they do move, how much will they move? And I think there's a large consensus, because I think Lindsay David has also got a poll out there and trying to capture that side of things. And if there is a rise, it's going to be very, very marginal. And how significant is it going to be? And you think about it, how significant is that going to be? Retrospectively, looking at what's happened over the last 6 or 8 weeks, with the banks raising rates independently anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, what's already happened, right? Fixed rates have gone up by at least 2%. And looking at the margins in the banks at the moment and the fact they're getting compressed, they're just sitting, hoping, praying that the Reserve Bank will move because they need some relief, because, of course, their funding costs are now a lot higher, and the term funding facility, which is that very cheap money from the Reserve Bank, is essentially going to run out. Now, it is quite interesting because there are lots of opinions whizzing around the place about what should be done and how it should be done, and should they do it and should they not move. And I guess there's two lenses. The first one is, how independent is the Reserve Bank from the government and from Treasury? Remember, they all sit around the table in this thing called the Council of Financial Regulators, which is effectively where they all plot what they're going to do. And yet they want to give the appearance of independence of the Reserve Bank. So that's the first question. The second question then is, will the Reserve Bank not move because they might be worried about being perceived to be political if they did move, right? And now they did do it in 2007 in November, I think, when Howard was going for his last term and got voted out, of course. They actually did move. And a number of the commentators have said, well, actually, the conditions now, with the high inflation and everything else, the conditions are actually more extreme than they were when the Reserve Bank moved last time. So therefore, surely they should move. Then other people say, well, no, it doesn't make any difference. Look, 1 month here or there really doesn't make much difference. So why don't you just leave it till after the election, get the election out of the way, and then move, right? So it is quite finely balanced.
well, and then there's another group that we haven't captured that's also out there that believe that they may even cut. I mean, it's not a big group. It's not a very vocal group, but there is a group out there that are saying that they may cut. I mean, who knows at the moment? Like,
well, they're at 0.1, so if they cut, they're at 0 or below. That's that would be pretty astonishing. I don't think that's very likely, if I'm honest. At the moment, I mean, my strategy is they will raise. I suspect they'll probably do it this time, although, as you say, it's a bit marginal and they might do it next month. But they will do it certainly by June. But the overall economic pulse is already slowing. Yeah. And so they'll probably have to take the rates down again, and probably even lower than where they are today within the next year or two. Because, of course, there's a lot of noise in other economies, like in the Fed, in the US. They're talking this week about putting rates up, even as the economy in the US is slowing as well. So you've got this sort of weird situation where the inflation has been created by years and years of too easy monetary policy, flooding the market with liquidity, taking rates ultra low, getting people to borrow more and more and more, getting companies to borrow more and more. So that's the reason why we've got inflation. And it's interesting how the narrative is now blaming Ukraine and oil and all those things, right? But it was going the wrong way before that.
Yeah, look, I think for me, it's also a question of how much does the RBA really need to raise the rates for there to be a significant property downturn in order to make, as many are saying, to make property affordable for those that are wanting to jump into the market. The contra to that is obviously the levers that you and I talk about. Yeah, look, it's got to be significant rate rises, but and there's so many balls that they've got to juggle, and there are at play for them to really raise rates. But let's just stay on a bit of a high and say that they hiked the rates, as many were calling earlier this year. We'll see anything up to 100 points. 1% by middle of next year, and how devastating that was going to be for the property market. Well, look, I think the counter to a lot of that, unless it's a significant rate rise, and for us to have a significant or a catastrophic property downturn, is one that's going to counterbalance the immigration levers that the government have already pulled and will continue to pull And again, we spoke about last week the rise in the visas, in the permanent residency visas that were granted in that were allocated for 2021, 22 with for the I think we talked about saying it was about 22,000, and there was a rise from a previous year of 16,000. So this is for skilled migrants,
yep.
And then from 22 to 23, which is already etched in stone, it's going up to 30,000. Now, outside of that, how many more have obtained permanent residency that are just waiting to board a plane to come over to Australia, not only from China but also from America, Canada, and Europe. Now another region that are going to be looking at Australia as a very very promising country to have a family, grow the family, and live in some far away from all the crap that's going on in the Northern Hemisphere. So you've got all this. So it's a real fine balancing act that's happening at the moment. But yeah, look, of course, I want cheaper homes, and I want cheaper dwellings, and I want it more affordable for the young families, for newcomers into the property arena to come on and to have a sustainable lifestyle in something that they can afford and grow, as opposed to these crappy dog boxes that the government keeps on pushing down our throats. Again, that's on the other side, or another another carriageway to this property highway that we're on, is what sort of dwellings are the government planning on building moving forward. So there's so much outplay, Martin. But again, I think initially with rates, what I'm seeing out there in the field, in the community, amongst the agents and amongst the people that we're dealing with, and that we at grassroots levels, it's not so much the economic impact of even a 10 basis point rise or a 25 basis point rise. It's more the emotion and the sentiment behind it that's going to come that's going to play out. But I think that's going to be thwarted, even if they go up, if they're raised by, let's say, 25 basis points, 25 basis points, they really go all out and bury the Liberal Party by doing so. We're going to see panic hit the vendors, and buyers are going to sort of pull back a bit and wait until prices drop. But you know what I'm saying? It's all based around emotion. But by the time people realise that a lot of this is very emotive initially, there's going to be people there's all sorts of things going to happen. But then the government's, again, I'll go back to, and I seem to pine on this over and over again, they've got other levers that they're going to be pulling, which is going to be really, really sad and more catastrophic for the Aussie battlers, the Aussies that want to get into the property market, and that is cashed up individuals from overseas, Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, whatever, that are cashed up, that are going to be coming over, and that are want to park the money here, want to park their lifestyle and have a new lifestyle because of the security that this great nation of ours provides, regardless of what you may think about what they've done to us over the last 2 years. Outside of that, we as far as I'm concerned, I don't care what, how I get trolled from today, tomorrow, but I believe that we're living in the greatest nation on the planet, and we've got an opportunity come the election to really make a difference, and to be conscious about as to who we vote for, that's going to best represent us moving forward, which is critical. And I would hate to think that any of the two major parties moving forward are going to start pulling those levers, because then, as far as I'm concerned, it's going to be even harder in the rebound I know a lot of people don't like me saying this, but I see the numbers. I see been looking at the immigration numbers. I've been looking at talking to the immigration lawyers and the agents as to all the inquiry that they're getting, our WeChat chatter as everybody else. The amount, the numbers could end up being phenomenal if there are no controls. And these are the controls that need to be put in place. None of that airy-fairy crap that we're getting with these incentives and promises of 40, 50%, and we'll get a free tour of Parliament House, or they'll turn Parliament House into a hostel for migrants, or whatever. Or we can Airbnb Kirribilli House and all that sort of whatever fluffy stuff they throw at us. That's all just fluff. There's a lot more there's a lot more going to happen, and we just have to be conscious. Hence the reason why we'll go back a step. We always say, if you're going to buy, you've got to buy with an upside. You've got to buy with a reason. If you need to get in now, if you need to get in 2 weeks' time, if you needed to get in a month ago, hope to God that you bought with an upside, because of all the issues that could happen, may happen, or may never happen, and you're still sitting prettier because you bought for a lot less than what a lot of other punters out there are paying for their properties anyway.
And the point there is not all properties are the same, and don't go just off the high-level numbers. You got to do the work. This is very much our mantra, isn't it? You got to do the work. You got to actually look for those where there is opportunity, and there is still opportunity even now. It's tricky, but you're right. The chances are after the election, migration turned to try and actually pull some of that. And in fact, debt and regret earlier on. I'll just put up the post again. Thanks very much for the super chat as well. There was a target of very strong migration. The question is, will they try and catch up? And I think the short answer is they will absolutely try to catch up, but they won't tell us before the election that that's actually what they're planning, because of course that would actually be a negative to the party who would set it. But if you look at the forward projections in terms of the demographic modelling that's being done at in Canberra for the demographic shifts and everything else, the assumption is we'll have a much bigger country with a much bigger population. And part of the reason for that is the fact that we've got more older people, and so we need to bring more younger people in to try and rebalance the economy. So we've got enough younger people still working to help to cover the costs of the older people who are moving into retirement. So that demographic shift is something we're seeing here, although of course it's not as severe as it is in, say, Japan, where it's absolutely extreme, or it's now happening in China. So you've got this sort of demographic move going on. So there's a whole lot of stuff below the waterline that none of the political parties want to talk about.
No, they don't. As we've been saying, they're just both opposite wings of the same bird. Where the destination is going to be, unfortunately, is going to be the same. Who else? Look, who else is putting their hand up to go and pick fruit? Who else is putting their hand up to go and pick veggies from out west, and with these farmers that can't get a hand? Who else is putting a hand up to be labourers and dishwashers and in restaurants or in the construction sites? That's the unfortunate thing, Martin. That's a discussion that needs to also be had as to why aren't the young people incentivised to seek and pursue these roles? Why do we have to bring in overseas students? I mean, Adelaide, talk about Adelaide earlier on, and or South Australia. Didn't the new South Australian government, haven't they just put out a big ad campaign bringing in the £10 POMs? Well, didn't that just happen last week, or was that just me dreaming about it or thinking about it? I mean, I saw an ad about the Adelaide government advertising for £10 POMs or along those lines. In other words, calling for the backpackers to come in, because nobody wants to pick, I guess, the grapes, to make the wines and so forth.
The point there, Edwin, is it's very interesting. If you listen to the business community saying that they need more people, right? What they actually want is more cheap people, right? So there is a a wages pressure question here that's dressed up as a migration question in my mind. And it's interesting that Matthias Cormann some years ago said the conservative side of politics, low wages growth is a design feature. It's not a bug. It's a feature. It's deliberate. It's designed so effectively we keep wages as low as we can, right? And so the way to get around this is to bring in more people from overseas who they can get to work more cheaply. The problem is that if they have to pay Aussie conditions, they have to pay a lot more, and that would actually lift their costs of doing business. That's something that is not really being fully discussed, in my view.
It's not. It's not being discussed, and this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm trying to get at. Is this is where the government should really be focused on. Where's the Labor Party on this? Where are the left or green side of the Liberal Party on this? Where are they? Where are any of the political parties really on this? It's a design. It's in the design, as you say, Mark, and that's the unfortunate thing. And this is where that we need to be more vocal about it. Look, I don't look down at people picking fruit. I don't look down at people picking veggies or whatever, or people in the kitchen staff or labourers in the construction site, because they're critical to get things going. I mean, I washed dishes when I was going through college as well, and I finished college at a certain hour, and then went to the local restaurant, and that's how I put myself through part of my education when I was younger. It was just one of those things. Driving a 1963 VW with no heater box, no heating. All I had was a full-on permanent cooling system through the streets of Canberra in winter. Finishing at 1-2 o'clock in the morning after I finished washing. Tidying up the kitchen of the restaurant, before I could go home in freezing cold. That's some of the stuff that I had to do. I mean, I don't want I don't want people playing the violin. I'm not asking people to play the violin or anything. That's just stuff you do. But looking at it now, there's a need for that discussion to be had in order for us not to be bringing in all these migrants. We're also losing tradesmen. We're also losing skilled tradespeople. I've been watching it for the last 10 years. It's just been, and here we are. We're at a point where where our TAFE colleges are absolutely decimated. There's in some colleges don't even offer the trades that they would have offered 5-10 years ago, and that's trades that we need to continue to build the infrastructure and to continue to build the growth that this nation needs to have and will be having in the future. We're going to be importing a lot of this. We're importing a lot of IT. We're going to be importing, as I said, the easiest pathway, or the governments have made it so much easier for three sectors of three working sectors: the IT industry, finance, and the medical. I mean, we have great universities. The GOAT of computing performance. I would say the GOAT, the most renowned computing performance engineer globally. And I say globally, because of what he's done, what he's doing, and what I know about him, and I call him the GOAT, computing performance. He's a local. He's a Newcastle boy. Born and bred in Newcastle. Went to Newcastle University, and he's sought after by Netflix, by Intel, by the Facebook. Have been courting him to take on the role as a computing engineer. These are the people that we put out. Great people, great universities, but it's all going going downhill because we're so focused on we've been so focused on three sectors: mining, the tourism, property, and cheap education. When I say cheap education, nothing, tickle and giggle degrees just to get overseas students into the faculties. It's shameful.
I had a Monty Python moment. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. There are the two things. No, there are the three things. Sorry, that was an aside, but I thought it was quite an amusing one. Now, let me just put this up. This was very interesting comment from the ex-RBA governor. This is in the AFR, saying house prices must fall for the sake of young. Basically, he's arguing that the policy has been all over the place, and that if we actually continue to stoke prices higher, and whatever we do with regard to migration, the problem is that essentially we're going in the wrong direction. So I think it's very interesting when an ex-RBA governor basically comes around and implicitly calls the current RBA governor, out for not doing the right stuff. I thought it was a really interesting comment in the AFR today.
Look, it is, and then I guess it also comes back to all the grants and everything else that the governments are throwing, or the proposed governments are throwing at the voters. It's sort of I guess he's saying, like, the grants are only stake the market. We've got to look at other areas or other means and ways of reducing the property prices. But how long ago did we stop looking at decentralising the centres or the major commercial hubs? Wasn't it in 1982 the fact that Rant wanted to build a major city over the mountains in Orange, to decentralise city? I mean, look at the pressure that was there at the time. Look, current infrastructure. It all leads back to Sydney. It all leads back to Rome, to where to where they want to contain it. So over the last couple of decades, all that the different government policies and the narrative and the way that the government or those in control have been pushing the minds of people or people wanting to come into the market has been geared to move closer to the city, to the central hubs, as opposed to looking further afield, looking to the greater regions of Sydney, where they could get something better, something with a little bit more lifestyle, with a little bit more space, as opposed to being confined in smaller areas. But why hasn't that happened? Because the state governments, along with federal governments, along with local governments, just haven't been bothered, trying to decentralise where the support base predominantly has gravitated or comes from. It's all so political, and it's shameful. Because as you and I say, that government policies have let the Australian people down for decades now, and we are where we are because of that, because of the pandering to one mob, pandering to another mob, and not really focusing on the greater needs of the Aussie community. Mm. So you've got this issue. So again, people may think that. Look, again, this is something else that some are going to troll me on Twitter on and everywhere else when I say this. But sometimes the young people now need to start looking further afield and stop wanting to live in their ideal world as well. But then again, do you blame them? or do you blame society for what making them believe, during the 25 years of life, the 25 or 30 years of life that they've just had, all of a sudden we can't change their minds, over one day, the course of one day, because they haven't really learned to make the sacrifice. When my parents came to Australia, when we came to Australia in 1974, some of my family at that time went to Emu Plains. That went to Emu Plains, went to the greater region. I mean, back then, we grew up in Gladesville, and if you went past West Ryde in the mid 70s to late 70s, if you went past West Ryde, you were in the bloody western suburbs. It was unheard of. You needed a picnic lunch. You need a picnic basket to go to Parramatta, for crying out loud. But some made the sacrifice and went out to Emu Plains to start their property journey, to start their dream, their ownership of the great Australian dream. Others that stayed, others of my family. I'm just talking purely about my family, my uncles. Others stayed, within the Sydney region. Others stayed around the Meadowbank and so forth. But they didn't buy a house. They bought a two-bedroom apartment with 3 kids, and that's what they started with. To start their Aussie dream and so forth. We need to make those sacrifices, and this is part of some of the. A lot of the time, this is what I talk to our clients about. But Martin, it's hard to talk to people about making sacrifices when the bloody government, just keep on throwing and staking this fire and not building infrastructure. And you can't blame the young people either. On the other side of that coin, you can't blame them for not wanting to go further afield, to look at something further afield, as opposed to buying a terrace in the west for 1.5, or looking further afield, something with a bit of land with 700, 800 square metres, a bit further afield, with on a decent block of land with a 4-bedroom house and a swimming pool for that. Because why? Because there's no infrastructure. There's my family took those risks in the 70s, but it's hard to do that now, given what we know, and with everything else that's compounding, all the other pressures that are on these young families wanting to get into the market. It's a sad state of affairs.
Well, there's 2 observations there. The first is we've got the marketing-led world where everybody wants instant gratification, right? And you couple that with instant access to credit. So if you want it, you can just get debt to have it. Exactly. And that's why the debt burden is so huge. And of course, with low interest rates, people were able to, just accumulate a lot more debt. Now, of course, that's going to turn nasty now with interest rates rising. I have always said there are times when using debt's good and appropriate, but there's also times when just grabbing for the instant solution. And it's interesting. The number of people that I speak with on my one-to-one conversations, first purchasers, right, getting into the market. Well, they want 4 beds, right? They want double garage. They want all the trimmings, right? And they want a new kitchen and everything else. It's like they don't start, and build up. They want instant gratification. So that's part of this psychology that's driving a lot of this. And of course, who wins? The people that win are the banks, because they're actually able to write more loans and therefore grow their balance sheet and grow their profits and grow the rewards for the bankers. The government wins because it inflates the GDP because of all this activity, but it's not necessarily productive activity. And I keep reminding everybody that just throwing more money at property and inflating the value of property is actually unproductive, because what it's actually doing is sucking more gas out of the rest of the economy. And now we're in the situation where we've got 1.5 million households, according to my latest modelling, that's actually already struggling with rates low. So they're going to find it really tough ahead. So, my view is we've got to find a different model. Now, that's going to be unpopular, and a lot of people say, "Oh, we can't do that. We can't allow property prices to fall." And the government will say, "No, we need to continue credit," and the banks will say, "We have to keep lending." But I just keep asking the question: are you sure? Is that really the only recipe in town, or is there actually an alternative, better recipe? And actually, could it be that the necessary rise in interest rates and the slowing down of property might actually give us a break to take a more strategic view around property, rather than just keep pumping and pumping and pumping and pumping, despite the fact that the politicians and the banks and the major construction companies and the build to rent mob, etc., they all want to just perpetuate the old model and just do more of it, finding essentially more mugs to buy and getting more people locked into longer term loans and just continuing to pay those loans forever and ever and ever. As I keep reminding people, you are but a cash flow. Right? As long as you go on making the cash flows, that's all they worry about. But the question is that necessary the right answer? And then let me just, as we sort of come to the end of the conversation, Edwin, I want to put up this one, because there's another side to this too, isn't there? Or what about the poorly constructed nature of a lot of the property and the implications of poor quality construction on those investments that people have bought? Because that's the other side of the equation that nobody's wanting to talk about.
100%. And let's also be just clear before we continue. We're not blaming. I'm not blaming. I'm sure you're not blaming the young people.
No,
I'm not blaming. We're just saying that
it is what it is.
It is what it is, and each individual has to make a decision based on their needs, wants, desires, and capacity.
Yep.
That's how I treat it. I speak the way I speak. Sometimes it sounds confusing because I'm confused in my head. I'm Latin of Latin blood, so I'll speak with my hands as well. So very, very emotional. I'll just put it out there and then wait for to see what comes back. That's just. But one thing I want to make clear is I'm not blaming the young people, because I just saw a post there that. Saying stop blaming the young people. It's not about blaming the young people. If I'm putting blame on anything, or if I'm going to pin the blame on something or someone, it's the political parties that, and I say, of both persuasions that have just skewed or they've moved away from their mandate, from their directive to look after the Aussie. To look after us, whether it be infant, young, old, or whatever. They've just pandered to their own little greedy, selfish needs. So if I'm going to pin the blame on anybody or somebody, it's the political landscape that we've been in for the last 20 years. And I don't care what excuses they use. It's just shameful, because they've really, really let us down. So hopefully that's cleared. Going back to the next topic was the fear in construction, and that's something that the WeChat chatters have been very, very hot today. Although that video post that you put up there, Martin, that's from about 2 years ago, with the issues of construction. But look, that's still very much in people's front of mind at the moment, particularly with the Chinese community, with the WeChat chatterers, and as I said, we follow them very, very closely, because what they do and what they say, they do move in a way that that's interesting for us to take note of, because as I said, it's not a very big market, and this, albeit that they are a big group of investors overall, and they do influence markets, as we've seen in many parts of Sydney. So what they've been talking about, and what a lot of people have been facing, not just the WeChat chatterers, but in a lot of other groups and a lot of other platforms, particularly with the floods and everything else that we've been having, is this whole issue of construction, and construction with badly constructed properties, or in all areas, the land subdivisions, that the civil works have not been attended to properly, and then you've got all these issues when the weather patterns change, or when there's floods or there's droughts and everything else. So in that particular current affair program that you showed there on the screen, Martin, that was one of the major land developers in Australia. That from memory, there was about 900 or so affected homes. and there was great issues around there. Now, what the WeChat chatterers are saying is that if this is happening with the bigger home and land builders, what about the smaller ones that come and go, that are here one day, gone the next? How do you get compensated for that? So what they're saying, and this is where our people need to listen very, very carefully, is what they're saying is let the uneducated, let those that don't want to listen, let those that want to fly, they want to shoot off quick and take these grants, let them take it and let them go and park the money there, because they're going to come unstuck later on down the track with these construction issues. What we're going to focus on is the established homes in established areas, in areas where they've been there for 10, 15 years already. And that's where they're going to be parking their money, whether it be as an owner occupier, and again as investors. So it's being very cautious, very careful, and all they're saying is with these government grants and government handouts and and little surprise gifts that they're trying to hand out or make you think that you're going to benefit from, it's really a bigger detriment, because all it does is invites the cowboys in the construction industry to basically grab that cash and take off and never to be seen again. And the poor bastards again are the ones that fell not only for the Ponzi scheme in terms of the mortgages, but also they end up with a lemon at the end of the day that they can't sell, or it depreciates so much in value because of the issues that are inherent with that building.
No, absolutely, it is concerning, and I think it's just worth here. Cookie Boy actually, Pope Cook has said, what about the news article saying half of Australia's building constructions could go belly up? We're seeing a lot of pressure in the construction sector, but we're also seeing a lot of drawing from large construction firms demanding to be allowed to do more planning more quickly and to build more stuff. In other words, replicate the low quality construction model just to basically sell stuff quick. And to my mind, that's part of the problem. And actually, a lot of the problem we've got with this whole issue with regard to property and property value and all those things is those stakeholders that are very much strongly connected to the politicians, but the industry is hugely influential. Not only does it pay a lot of money directly to political parties, but they basically are too big to be able to do anything other than say, well, just keep us going, because if we fall over, that's going to be a problem. So to my mind, what we've created is a monster here, where it's the construction sector that's actually driving a lot of the agenda. And in fact, you could argue that the first home loan stimulus packages and the home builder were more about saving the construction sector than anything else.
Yeah, look, with regard to the question that the Cookie Boys asked there, it is a really interesting question. It is a really interesting topic to elaborate a little bit on. This is what I know. A lot of the issues that they're having is predominantly due to the supply chain issues, and we're going to be having a lot more of that moving forward. Now, that's the construction industry, and a lot of that's also to do with high-rise development and the issues that they're being faced with, particularly in New South Wales, with the building commissioner that's going out there and really tearing developers apart. So there's a lot of issues around that. Now, as to going belly up, are the governments really worried? If they do go belly up, I guess that's going to rid a lot of the smaller players that don't really have too much input or say persuade political parties. They're like any other industry. They're just going to let them go. They're just going to, I'd say, fall off the perch. The interesting thing, Martin, is that from what's happening over in China, is that at the moment, presently, as we know from the chatter there in China, property tycoons and industrial tycoons that have been, obviously, because they're well connected, so they're able to do this. They're looking, and some already have and are in the process of moving their funds and establishing themselves in Vietnam. So at the moment, from what we're seeing, from our perspective and our WeChat chatters, is you've got these mega wealthy individuals, and basically Vietnam is going to be the beneficiary of the current lockdowns in China by way of construction, by property tycoons, and by way of industry with all these owners of major plants and factories setting up there in Vietnam in order to not so that they don't have all their eggs in the one basket moving forward over in China. My question is how many of those are going to be allowed to park their money over here, and how many of them are going to continue or will begin to operate again moving forward, regardless of what political party, what persuasion comes in? How many of them are going to be basically welcome with open doors, with a red carpet as they come off the plane into our shores? That's a big question. And this is something, again, that the political parties won't be talking about. They won't be publicising it. But look, you know what? At the end of the day, it's cash is king. And in one way, you could say that from an economic point of view, we need them in order to create that the jobs, the construction, keep it going, to counter all those smaller developers and builders that are going to be falling off the perch because of the current issues that they're facing. Which again, it's you and I can't control it. A lot of and it comes back to, in my mind, to what the independents are going to do to really bring a lot of these underlying issues moving forward that the Aussies are going to face. Centred around this whole thing, of owning property, or how the construction industry is going to move forward and what's going to happen. So that's, in a way, hopefully that gives Cookie Boy a bit of an answer to his question. I also noticed there was something on that somebody put up a very high question there with dollar value, one of those
super chats. Yeah, I've got it here. This one here. Go. So what do you think will happen to the construction industry reselling off the plan if rates go up a lot and deposits to buy off the plan make sense to walk away from and just lose that deposit if the market dips? So very important question, right? So we know there are some people walking away who signed up and are walking away. And we also know that the construction sector has got a lot of vacant properties and they're trying to manage that whole process. And Jason, thank you very much for the super chat. It's greatly appreciated.
So let me just read that again, Martin. Just what will happen to the...
Okay, I'll read it to you again. What do you think will happen to the construction industry reselling off the plan if rates go up a lot and deposits to buy off the plan make sense to walk away? So in other words, walk away and just lose the deposit if the market dips due to what may happen. So it's two elements, right? The first element is this question of selling off the plan. If rates rise, what's going to happen? And then if people decide to walk away, rather, they lose the deposit, how does that play out? And we know that's happening. We do know that's happening now.
Yeah, it's already happening. And my thing is if you're an individual there, I'm not saying our follower, Jason's in that predicament, but I just hope to God that you were able to negotiate a 5% deposit as opposed to 10% deposit. That's the first thing. It's better to lose 40,000 than it is to lose 85,000. That's first thing. Secondly, look, a lot of developers are going to be thinking because the contracts are going to be rescinded. That's going to buy them a little bit more time, and hoping and praying they'll be on their knees for a lot longer of the evening, hoping that the students and and everybody else, and the backpackers and everybody else, the ghost PR visa holders that are being ghost visa holders that end up coming along. So that's what they're going to be hoping for. So what happens there in that case is obviously if the contracts are rescinded, that money goes to them. I don't know what the current where the property would sit, and obviously I'm just talking in general. There is a I would say they will have that buffer. They will be negotiating a lot longer terms with their construction funding with their banks, and they're going to have to skedaddle real quickly to get new buyers for those properties. Otherwise, the banks will obviously put a stop on drawdowns for the different stages of the construction. So yeah, it's one of those. One of those things, tricky things that could go many different ways. The sad thing is not the sad, but what we could end up seeing. And again, we say this in terms of apartment and high-rise development, not so much in homes, but in terms of apartment high-rise development. When a lot of these developers or builders go bust, it's harder for the next builder developer to buy a construction. Particularly if they've gone past what we call the transfer slab, which is basically the level that from the basement car parks to when you start building what you see the commercial or the residential build, the residential units above. So once you go past that transfer, because what's happening below the basements is what's very important. And if the next developer or the next builder that takes on that job, they're going to be given the guarantee on the whole development once it's complete to the buyers. So obviously, it'll be banks will lose a lot. But then again, look at what happened last time around. They got bailed out anyway, didn't they? So,
well, they did, and that's the point. The banks have a way out, and interestingly, if you look at some of the construction failures, the buildings got picked up and then got sold later. So, but it is interesting, and in all of this, individuals could lose their deposit because they might choose to actually walk away and just say, that's the most economic route for me, but it's still losing a deposit. And what I always say to people is, if you're going to enter these into these commitments, make sure you do your homework. Make sure you're clear about what it is you're actually getting involved in, right? Because it could actually turn pear-shaped.
Yeah, it also depends what phase of the development it's at. So there's a lot of things to play out. I would take it very strong legal advice.
Absolutely right. Now, there's one other question which came in, and Better's actually asked it earlier on and asked again. How high will Fed funds rates go before they break something? And where do you think the RBA cash rate will be when this happens? Well, I'm going to give you my opinion. I think that the Fed is now looking as though it's going to probably raise rates by at least 2 or maybe 3% over the next year or so. I think that once they get 2% higher from where they are, that will be sufficient to break things. And the Reserve Bank will be slow to follow, but they've got the same memo from the BIS as all the other central banks. They will put rates up. I reckon that the Reserve Bank will probably end up raising rates a couple of percent. But in each case, both the Fed and the RBA will then be required to turn the rates down again. So I'm expecting short-term rates higher, but then rates coming back down again, because what they will break is effectively the momentum in the economy, which is already easing. And the point, of course, is that all the economies in the Western countries in particular are actually quite weak at the moment and are actually degrading rather than actually moving forward. So consumer confidence is dropping, the growth levels are dropping, and it's not going to take that much to tip it over. And of course, the other point is the consumers will actually hunker down and borrow less and spend less. Businesses will need to borrow more just to stand still, and that means they're going to have to pay a lot more as well. So all of those things I think are in play. So that's my take, but who knows? I could be completely wrong. But I do think that the Fed will move them quite quickly, and I think that we will follow.
Yeah, look, I concur with you on that. The only thing is I think it's going to be it's going to take a little bit longer. I don't think it's going to be as quickly as what many of us would like to believe that they should. One thing is what you and I believe that should happen. Another thing is what the powers to be, what games they want to play and how long they want to keep this thing firing away for.
Yeah, absolutely. And Vanessa actually made the point about money laundering. Yeah, there's something probably we can't touch today, but we should another occasion. I think in Australia, the property sector is ripe for international money laundering, and they've deliberately steered around the rules and the regs, etc., etc. Now, Edwin, as we come to the end, do you have a tip for the day, or have you given it up already?
A tip for the day. Look both ways before you cross the road.
Okay, fair enough.
Especially with more traffic that's out there. With more traffic that's out there after these. Everybody seems to. I don't know about you, Martin, but it's almost back to the 2019 traffic jams. I have to. My
daily traffic jam now is from 8 until 9 and 4 till 5 locally here. Right, never used to be. So it is definitely back to where it was. But there we go.
Look, the real tip, is the same as what we shared before. And it's really straightforward. If you don't get the property for the price that you want it at, I believe that you got to stay frosty. You just walk away. Walk away because again, if you're purely on the numbers, regardless of everything else that's playing out at the moment, just on the numbers are not showing me anything different here in Sydney than what we've been saying. That it's a buyer's market. You can not only dictate the somewhat the price that you want to come in at, but you can also dictate the terms of the contract, which could fall in your favour as well. What we've done, in a couple of cases, we've been able to negate the auction campaign terms and conditions by way of waiving the cooling off, and we've actually got a cooling off period in order to for us to buy the property on behalf of our clients prior to auction, which is something that you need regardless of what the market is doing now, because I have already heard from 3 different agencies, separate agents, that the valuations have come short and people have lost the deposits. In one case was 5%, the others, thank God it was only the 0.25. But money's money, and money in your pocket is better than money in the vendors or the real estate agent's pocket. So dictate your terms, walk away, because the numbers are telling us that it's still, and the buyer's market is as the buyer's market still becoming strong. Just keep an eye on those numbers.
Right. Well, Edwin, thank you very much for your time today and for the live. I'll be very interested from the audience whether that you'd like more of the live rants rather than the recorded rants, because normally at this time when I sign off with Edwin, I then have to go and spend an hour or so editing it before it goes up, whereas now it's finished and ready to be replayed later. So Edwin, thanks for that. We'll look forward to having another rant either record or live next week, and be interesting to see where those rates go and what happens. It's certainly interesting times. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you very much. All the best.
See ya. So there you go, folks. I hope you found that useful. As I say, do let us know in the comments whether you like the live rants or whether you prefer the recorded rants, because they're a bit different in character, but we quite like doing the live. Just to say that tomorrow we've got Steve Keane coming into the studio, and he's going to talk with me about some of those critical imperatives around interest rates and housing policy and all those things. So you'll be able to ask him a question live if you'd like to do that. So make a note. We'll be back at the normal time of 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. And I think it'll be a really worthwhile chat. And I'll say thank you very much for spending some Monday evening with us as well. I look forward to seeing you back tomorrow. and have a good evening. And we look forward to the next conversation. This is Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, signing off. Cheerio.